Today, I wanted to talk a little bit to you about our children and their use of technology. And when I first started, thinking about this topic, I was in the kitchen one afternoon or evening and kind of cooking up dinner, and I noticed that my husband was on the computer checking emails from work. My other son was doing homework on the computer. My middle one, who's a 7th grader, was playing a video game with some of his friends. And my youngest was sitting there on my phone playing some kind of little educational game for a few minutes. And, I thought to myself, kind of, when did this happen? When did this family life, this communication get away from us? We're all more divided now because we're all more engaged in the technology that we have. And with the advent of wonderful Apple products, and I've got my technology here, and I've got my phone somewhere in my purse along, and I've got iPads at home. But with the development of this, it's really changing our lives and the way we communicate with one another. And this change can be occurring in both positive and negative ways. Of course, there are a lot of ways where we're able to get information so quickly, but our access to that information is constant. It's nonstop. We constantly have our cell phones on. We're constantly checking our emails, texting, looking up things, which, again, has pros and cons. And if you look at it, technology today is 24/7. So we can have access at any time, anywhere. It used to be that, children, in order to access the computer, they'd have to go to their desktop. In order to play video games, we had the Game Boy handheld devices, but they had to go to their Xbox for more games and, larger screens. With the iPod and the iPad, I'm often in car line, and I'll open up the door, and, I see 3, 4, 5-year-olds all sitting there with their little iPads playing on their iPads. And, where is that interaction? Or if we're doing so much and spending so much time on the technology, what are we giving up? And how is that affecting our lives, and how is that affecting our children's lives? So it has become a concern, and because this blossoming of technology and of Apple products is fairly new in a lot of people's lives. The iPad is only, few years old. A lot of scientific studies haven't been done on the effects of technology on the brain, but they're starting. And some of the concerns by the scientists and some of what people are seeing are concerning to our children, because what's happening is, the generation is coming up and entering college, and so they're starting to see, okay, what is this doing to the classroom, to the learning environment? I wanted to give you a background on a few statistics that I found through some of the research. An average child, 8 to 18, spends approximately 7 hours and 38 minutes on technology a day. Now, you might say, oh my gosh, 7 hours? How can that possibly be? There's no way my child spends 7 hours. And your child might spend less. This is a national average. But the thing is if you look at when they're in school, they have technology lab, which they go to, so they use that. If they have cell phones, some of your children in 6th grade might have cell phones. Anytime they pick up the phone or text or check anything, when they come home and they do homework, when they watch a TV show, when they go online and check out a YouTube video, all those hours are added up. And if you look at the past 5 years, the amount of time that children spend on technology has increased by 1 hour and 17 minutes across the country. And they say part of the reason for this is accessibility, and is the fact that more children are getting access to technology at an earlier age. I see programs apps on Apple that are available for 3, 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds are sitting there learning how to use the mouse, and we applaud them. And part of it is our world. It's a necessity. If you go into business, you're going to need to have technology part of our lives, and our children's world even more so when they get older. So it's something that they need to learn, but again, it's the time. In the survey, and some of these statistics are in the handout that I gave you, in the survey, 2/3 of the young people say that the TV is on during mealtime. Now that means on background noise, could be the news, CNN, Fox News on the background while you're sitting down eating dinner. And they might not be directly watching it, but a lot of kids say it is on in the background. And how does that change the focus or the concentration, where one member at the dinner table is sitting and watching and not necessarily fully engaged? It's another distraction. And in the national statistics, they're saying 71% of children have TVs in their bedrooms. So for that kind of being able to watch TV, get online, play video games, those minutes get away very quickly. How many of you have often said to your children, you've been on there for 30 minutes, it's time to get off, you know, playing the video games, or you've watched TV, and they say, 30 minutes, it's only been like 4 or 5. They don't realize the amount of time, as I don't. Sometimes I can be engrossed checking my emails, I'll say, oh my gosh, it's 6:30, I have to make dinner, or something goes on. So it is engrossing, and as parents, if we have TVs and access to technology in the bedroom, sometimes those hours or those minutes spent with technology can get away from us because we're not aware necessarily of how much our children are actually using. TV viewing has declined, which looks like a great statistic until you find out the increase in technology, because kids have access to videos and TV shows now on their computer. So there's less TV watching going on, but there's more maybe watching on YouTube videos, shows that were aired at 11 o'clock at night and they couldn't see them, so they're bringing them up and watching it. So that has declined, but because of the iPads and iPhones, everything has increased. If you look at the comic strip in the front, it says, "But you told me to go outside and play," and the little kid is sitting there with his mother, and he's got his laptop. The outside play has declined drastically, the free play. Now, unless you have kind of kids in the neighborhood where they're able to organize an activity, but if you put your child outside in the front yard and say, go play, a lot of them now will kind of look at you and say, with what? Like, what am I supposed to do out here? It's almost not all children, but a lot of children, a foreign experience to them. And so the way we play, the way our children interact is different. If you look at as far as statistics go, I did some statistics of our own here at Seacrest a couple years ago in the middle school. And we talked a little bit, we had the students take home a sheet, and we talked a little bit about how much they use technology, and they needed to report everything that they did on the internet, on when they were watching TV, when they were on their cell phones, their iPads, doing homework, as well as any kind of social interaction. We had them report this for a period of 7 days. So I want you to keep in mind that these numbers are also weekend numbers. So when you see those late night hours, some of that is Friday, Saturday, Sunday evening. And if you also look at how it's divided up, I did it from 8th, 7th, and 6th, and the numbers decline, each year that it goes down if the children are younger. So for the 6th graders, which most of you have 6th graders, from 8 to 10 p.m., 89% of the students used technology during that time. Now remember, that was not necessarily every night. It just meant that during the week, they used technology during those hours at some point on some of the days, which is a pretty normal thing. I'm guessing most of the 6th graders, when I ask them this year what time they go to bed, they usually say anywhere between 9 and 10. So for them to kind of be checking something or doing something's pretty normal. Then you get to the hours of 10 to 12, which 58% of the students were using technology or some sort of technology. And then 12 to 2, 34%, thank you. 34% of the students were using technology. Now that could be on a Friday night or a Saturday night. Now what is surprising, and I don't necessarily mean for you to go home and now say to your children, what are you doing on the internet? Because remember, this was taken a couple of years ago, but that's also scary because the iPads weren't around a couple of years ago. A lot of kids didn't necessarily, this was about 4 years ago, many kids didn't have access to iPhones yet, or if they were just getting them. So, this was a different time, so it could possibly be even higher, but from 12 to 2, 34%. What does that mean? What are the answers that I got from some of the kids when we did this, and what am I still getting today? Well, my parents tell me to take the cell phone and to put it outside on the desk and plug it in, when I go to bed, so that I don't have the technology, and the computers are charging on the desk. But on the weekends, they're usually in bed by 11, 12, and out cold. I'm still awake. Well, their biological clocks are changing. So they get that energy surge, or they're starting to in 6th and 7th grade, where 10, 11 o'clock, they're up and awake, and they're ready, and then they sleep in really late the next morning. So, 10, 11 o'clock rolls around, they're a little bored, and they're sitting in their room thinking what to do. They sneak outside, they take the cell phone, they text a few of their friends who are also up, or the few friends that they know are up, and they talk to them. Or they get online and they check some things out or play a video game. Not necessarily doing terrible, horrible things. Think back to when we we all were children, and sometimes things that we did that our parents didn't necessarily know our every single move. But they are doing this, and some of them, as they get older, those numbers, if you look at it by the time they're in 8th grade, the 12 to 2 a.m. is 71%. So it does increase every single year. And if you look at the average number of hours per day spent online and texting and gaming by Seacrest students in 6th grade, it was 4 hours and 12 minutes, far below the average of 7 hours, according to the national studies, which is a good thing. However, remember again, this was some years ago, so the iPad wasn't available, and some of them didn't have access to iPhones, which could do as much, or cell phones that could do as much for us. If you look at our whole culture and how it's affecting our culture, we're a speed culture. I was reading an article the other day that talked about how we want things quickly. We're an instant gratification culture because everything we want, we need, we can have access to at all times now. And so how our minds and our rewiring in our brain is actually changing to want and demand things quicker and faster. And there's several articles out if you search on how Google rewires our brains and how the activity in our brain changes, and how literally they took individuals who had never used the internet. That was probably difficult to find, but individuals who had never used the internet, and they put them behind the internet, they hooked them up to MRIs, and they saw within a period of 5 minutes of internet use, their brains went from having no activity in the prefrontal cortex to their prefrontal cortex going wild, and then the next time they got on it, it immediately went into action and swung into action. So their brain and the synapses rewired within 5 minutes. So internet use has the ability to rewire our brains, which can be a great thing because, again, it's here to stay, obviously. It's going to be a part of our lives. But then what is it doing, or what areas of our brain might be missing out because of this extra use it's getting in one area? Because when one area is used, other areas shut down. And when you're younger and your brain is still developing, if those neurons and those connections aren't being formed, then how does it affect them later on as adults, when our brains are still developing?